Hey guys, how you doing? Raymond here from the Raymond Report with our new podcast that we're going to kick off this season. And you can listen to us on your favorite download device, either it's Apple iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or Google Play, and even iHeartRadio. Wherever you download your podcast, you can listen to today's show. What I like to do right now is introduce our very good friend of mine, a special guest that you're going to see here each and almost and every day on the Raymond Report podcast. And he's a good friend of mine, and it's Ross Benjamin from Ross Benjamin Sports. How you doing, Ross?
Everything's great, Ron. I'm excited about this venture. Haven't worked with you in a while, and I'd be remiss if I didn't wish you a happy Canada Day.
Well, thank you, eh? Well, thank you very much, Ross. And it is Canada Day here. It's a little different Canada Day. It's a virtual Canada Day, and you know what? Living in Canada, in Ottawa, it's a great city, great country. I served our fine nation for 5 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. So, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I'm sure all the Canadians listening will appreciate that as well. And hey, you know what? Just look around down the street here, and in a couple more days, it'll be the 4th of July, right?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, for those listening in the States, if you're not familiar with Canada Day, it's our equivalent of the 4th of July. So, again, we're going to be living the same way here, Ron, with this COVID-19 thing going on. It is what it is, and we just hope they come to some type of normalcy or a remedy pretty soon.
Exactly. And you know what? It's during these times we're doing the best out of these situations, and it's we'll get through this, right? And we're the world is very resilient, and hopefully the people who are on this vaccine, they've been at it for a while here, and hopefully they can come up with something so we can see what type of normal life that we can lead after once this is all over, right?
Well, not for nothing. I know that sports is not the most important thing in life, and certainly with this COVID-19 pandemic going on, it really shows you that there's a lot more important things in life. But, at this point, we really need sports just from the neck up, right? You know what I mean? Guys like me and you especially. I'm missing those daily challenges, Rod. I'm missing it where you could just relax and watch a game at night and take your mind off all this, the racism stuff, the COVID-19 stuff that's going on in the world right now.
Yeah, no, I told my wife the other day, I said, I'm pretty, when it comes patient to stuff like this, but there comes like a snapping point where you're ready to snap if you don't have sports, right? It's just, I'm 51 now, and I've had sports my whole life. It's what I grew up doing.
Livelihood.
Yeah, exactly, right? So,
worst comes to worst, Ron, you just crack a window open, like you said.
Yeah, that's a rare here. Hey, it's like Groundhog Day. Bill? Ned Crothers? So, Ross, what we're going to do today on the podcast is we're going to talk about, one thing, the one thing that me and you bring to the table, and I don't mean to age us here, but it's a lot of experience, right? These grades here, they came from a lot of winning and losing, right? And I think we have a lot of experience between the both of us that we could share with the novice sports bettor out there. And, like I said earlier offline here, we're going to have a lot of veteran guys who seasoned vets who are going to listen to this also. And, you can always teach a dog a new trick type thing, right? And I think that we're going to be able to bring something different, our experience, and hopefully like you always say, our dry sense of humor. Not a Bob Newhart sense of humor type thing, but more of a Seinfeld dry sense of humor. But that's what I'm hoping to achieve here with the Raymond Report. And also, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Big Ragu, who's going to be joining us also, Christian Nally. He's a friend of mine. And the Big Ragu is a big Giants fan, and he's a football coach who retired, not retired, maybe, during this pandemic, he's laying low these days too. And, but he's really good at sports betting and fantasy. He's one of those fantasy guys too. He's really, every time I talk to him, he's always winning something in fantasy, but he will bring a lot to the table in football, just like you will, as I know that's your bread and butter. Again, when we start these podcasts, Ross, and when we talked earlier last week, the one thing we want to bring before we start a show is the sports handicapping 101, right? Just something to wet the whistle and make people realize like, hey man, these guys know what they're talking about. And hopefully when people listen to us and the light bulb goes off, where we say something that make people think twice, and then realize, say, maybe I'm doing it different, or maybe the people who give us the feedback, we might improve on something. We're always learning too, right, Ross?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we were talking off air, and you say, well, some of these guys have been around for a while. I don't know what we could teach them. I know, speaking for myself, and you agree, is, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I learn something new every day. If you research enough, you listen to people that you respect in the industry, you're always going to pick something up new. And as soon as you stop evolving, that's where you get stale.
Yeah.
And one thing I will say for the listeners out there, one of Ron's big strong suits is his ability to evolve and create. And I learned so much from him in that regard. He compliments me on occasion, but he doesn't realize how much. Just look at his site, folks, if you get a chance, atsstats.com, and the creativity in how he devises some of his numbers and statistics is incredible. And if you can't learn something from that, then you're not willing to learn.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ross. No, you're right. And the way that started, and it's as if I have a theory in life where everything changes every 7 years in life, right? Your friends, you're probably yeah, it's just. Yeah. But I find that the 7-year itch, that things change in life, and about 14 years ago, I guess, 2 cycles ago, as I realized that we got to shy away from conventional thinking in sports betting and get away from the dynasty teams like the Steinbrenner years, the Pocklington years in hockey. Those dynasty teams just don't, they had their time in like, say, the late 90s, early 2000s. And then when sports betting became to the forefront and offshore started getting here, the numbers started getting sharper. And the thing I realized down the road is like, you know what? It's about the percentages, and we'll get into that in just a sec here, Ross. But just to preview the people who are going to be listening, we're going to dive right into the NFL AFC East preview today, and then we're going to talk about baseball futures. And we got a good show here today. And again, if you're listening for the first time, you can download us on Spotify, Apple iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play. So we're going to be anywhere where you download your podcast. So let's get right into it, Ross. Sports handicapping 101. Let's talk about our philosophy of sports handicapping, and I'm going to toss you the rock here and tell me how your philosophy of handicapping is.
I wrote an article, as a matter of fact, many years ago on the old Phoenix Sports Ticket site, which Ron is and was the owner. I don't know if it still exists, but
yeah, it's still there.
So it's called Perception versus Reality. And one of the big themes I have, if you read my bio, is to be successful in sports betting, you got to capture the ideology. You have to start with thinking like a bookmaker. If you think like a bookmaker, you're going to have one step up to the guy next to you who doesn't see that angle. And when I say perception versus reality, people have short memories in sports betting, especially when it comes to football. They remember what happened the week before. It's fresh in their mind, and they let their emotions catch up to them. In other words, seeing a team, and I'm going to get to this later. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but a team coming off a win versus a team coming off a loss is a basic fundamental concept. People remember that. And if you're seeing that, the lines makers certainly are too. And what they're doing, Ron, in my opinion, on occasion, is they're taking advantage of the simplistic idea of you remember what happened the week before and you're overreacting next week. So that's basically how I look at things.
Yeah, and to play Dr. Fraser Crane here, the psychologist, that's the bookmaker. The bookmaker's job is Dr. Crane, right? He's taking that perception and weighing in the reality, and then he's making his formula to see exactly how he can balance the books and make half the people in the room bet one game on the Cowboys and the other half to bet on the Giants, right? And I agree 100% with that, Ross. My philosophy in handicapping and my fundamentals, again, like I said earlier in the podcast, it just evolved. And what I've learned in my research is that at the end of the day, it's about, the number is what the number is. And to me, there's three things you got to consider. Is there value in your selection? Don't overpay for a line because you love it so much. There has to be value in what you're betting into. Number two, the percentage play. Teams can't win and over-unders can't go forever. The over cannot always go over on every game. And there's a reason why there's a middleman. It's called the bookmaker. He has the adjustment. He has the adjuster, and his number is the adjuster to your number. And to me, value, the percentage play, and then cycles. I call it the performance cycles. Team performance cycles. Where are they in their? Do you remember back in the day? There used to be this handicapper. I can't remember his name, but he was a biorhythm handicapper. Remember that guy? He used to go based off biorhythms.
So he went against everything that made sense, kind of thing. Is that
exactly like in your body biorhythms? It was pretty fascinating. But what I think,
contrarian approach.
Yeah, almost right. But to me, the performance cycles is that every team, and I coach football, I played sports. I know when you're part of a team, there's game one and game last, and you're not going to play game one, game two, game three all the same. You're going to go through different cycles and ups and downs. You're going to get injuries, and those are the performance cycles that I consider when I do my handicapping. And I have a formula with the Raymond report that if things line up, and I call them indicators, if the indicators line up, then I got myself probably a good play. And that's the fundamentals of the Raymond report and the way I handicap sports. Now, talking about sports, what's your favorite sports to handicap, Ross?
Unequivocally football. And I guess I'm a little selfish and biased when I say that because, as you know, Ron, us both working in this industry for many, many years and people paying us for our advice, that's where the most action is. It's just something, the excitement about preparing. Games are a week apart, not every day. The excitement of watching the line movement, what happened the week before, the technical aspects to look at, the challenge involved in reading up and researching through the course of the week on a particular game that you may or may not like. It just brings that energy, that emotion, that passion that really keeps me going. So not to say that I don't love doing the other sports, but I'd be lying if I said that football isn't first and foremost in my mind.
Yeah, the thing with football is that there's a timeline to that game where you got 6-7 days between games, where in NHL, MLB, like it's daily. So that window of getting your information it shortens compared to football. And for the average Joe and Jane out there, they got lives. You know what I mean? They got lives, and they don't have time. They do their 9 to 5 or whatever, 8 hours or whatever hours they put into work. Then at night, if they got family commitments. So they don't have really a lot of time to handicap every day. But football, once you get to Thursday, that's when you really feel the energy starting and people start looking. And some, depending on their, their experience or when they want to start looking at and how serious they take it. And their bankroll will always dictate how serious they take it, right?
Absolutely.
I agree. Football to me has always been the sport that I've done well in. I also like baseball. Baseball to me, totals. I'm a totals guy when it comes to baseball, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But you know what? In the sports handicapping 101 segment here, Ross, we're just going to finish off this segment. And again, every time we do these podcasts to everybody, we're always going to be opening up with a sports handicapping 101 and sharing a bit of our knowledge and a tip, right? When we talked about this, Ross, and again, our gray hairs and beards are telling us that, we probably got some things to share with and one thing I really want to do through these podcasts, Ross, is I want to respect the people that came before us, like the Russ Culvers, the Mike Lees, the Buzz Dailies, all those guys. When I got in the industry in '96, that I wrote about and talked about, and they shared their knowledge. I want people to really remember those guys and remember what we're sports betting wasn't invented by a Twitter handle.
No, these guys were handicapping back in the day when there was no internet.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
me and you thinking about that right now, it's mind-boggling, right? I mean, we're numbers guys.
Yeah.
These guys were writing stuff down on a daily basis. Think how tough that had to be back then, and to succeed like they did. Those guys are Hall of Famers. I mean, one guy I learned, and if I can mention this, Ron, he's still alive and he's still going, Marc Lowrance. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I worked side by side with him for a year, and that was the most invaluable time of my life in terms of me being a handicapper and wanting to be a handicapper, and the drive to be successful and how to do things right with honesty and integrity. So kudos to those guys.
Absolutely. The Marc Lawrence playbook, man, it was
Around.
staple. Like, Phil Steele, same thing. Like, we'll get into that every episode. Again, folks, you can listen to our podcast each and every day on the wherever you download your podcast: Spotify, Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play. That was a good one. So before we finish off, so we talked about our fundamentals, favorite sports handicap. We're just going to finish it off here with one betting tip, Ross, and I'll let you kick it off.
Well, again, going back to my concept that I alluded to earlier, it applies to the NFL. I always look for teams with value, okay? And you could spot value very easily. A team that's coming off a straight-up and ATS loss facing a team that's coming off a straight-up and ATS win, especially if it's a division game, okay? And especially if they're an underdog. So, for example, this is a betting angle that's been successful since 1980. When you get a division underdog and they're coming off a straight-up and ATS loss in which they allowed 34 or more points. So not only did they not win and cover, but they allowed a ton of points and most likely got blown out. Again, fresh in your mind what you remember, right?
Yeah.
And then they're playing a team that's coming off a straight-up and ATS win. That particular situation, when that comes up, is 30-11 against the spread since 1980. And that's 73.1%. And then, Ron, if take it one step further, if that opponent they're playing, the team that's coming off a straight up and ATS win, if they covered by 10 or more, the underdog improves to 18-3 against the spread since 1980, which is a little over 85%. This came up one time last year, back on November 24th. Tampa Bay was a 3-point underdog at Atlanta. The Bucks had come off a 34-17 loss the week before against New Orleans, failing to cover as a 5-point underdog in that situation. Gave up 34 or more, coming off a straight-up and ATS loss. Atlanta, on the other hand, was coming off a 29-3 win at Carolina as a 4.5-point dog. Not only did they win and cover, they covered by over 30 points.
Wow.
But what happens? Tampa Bay, they win the game 35-22 at Atlanta as a 3-point underdog. Case in point.
Wow. Yeah, and and you really got to pay attention. Like those plays are like leap year, right? They like February 29th, you got to keep your eye on them when they come out, because you just don't know when it's gonna hit next, right? Like you said, 18-3 for underdogs.
18-3 for underdogs. Again, that's with adding a couple more queries in there where the underdog, the underdog, the team they were playing had to be coming off a straight up an ATS win in which they covered by 10 points or more.
Well, that's great.
And it improves to 18-3. But right off the bat, it's a division game, okay? It's a team coming off an underdog coming off a straight up an ATS loss in which they gave up 34 or more, which indicates on most occasions they probably got blown out.
Yeah.
And they're playing a team coming off a straight up in ATS win. Without looking at anything else, 30-11 ATS since 1980. That's 73%. So again, it's not going to come up a lot of times, Ron, but it's a good foundational starting point. Now I'm really getting specific. but as we alluded to before, looking for those situations in which the bookmaker is preying on your emotion in short memory.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, that's a good one, Ross. The tip I'm going to give out here is a tip that I've been. It's in my book, and it's a really good one. Um, I call it the silver bullet play of the week, and it's really good in college football. And what you want to do, folks, is once the line comes out for the following week. So we all know on a Saturday there's 50, 60 games, right? And the bookmakers know that. And one of their nightmares is getting just hit with a 10-team parlay that's going to really ruin their weekend, right? And put a dent in their books. So what their job is they want to make sure that you don't hit your first game so they can breathe a little bit easier, right? So I call the silver bullet play of the week, and it's the trap play of the week. It's normally that first game on the schedule that people, because what do people do once they get the parlay sheets and they look at that first game, and then they'll say, oh, that team, and it becomes so obvious that they think, oh, that team's going to kill that team. But some people don't know that it's a trap. And then normally, if the bookmaker can kill your parlay with that first game at the top of the schedule, then they can breathe a little bit easier knowing, oh, phew, I don't have to worry about that. And then there's a lot of silver bullets along the way too, right? But that's my silver bullet play of the schedule, right? If you can just be careful, and if you can use it to your advantage, right? If you know that's a trap play, go to the other side and take the other team, right?
Look at the other side of the table, Ron. If you're a bookmaker, right? If you could beat the better on the first game, you take away his aggressiveness and you put him in the chase mode.
Yeah, exactly.
Emotion.
Yeah, there you go. So there you have it.
That makes a lot of sense. It does.
So that's the Sports Handicapping 101's segment, guys. And again, if you want to listen to us, you can download us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you download your podcast. So we're going to jump right into it here, Ross. We're going to go with the NFL. I know this is your baby right here. I know you're probably drooling right now because you like the NFL. We're going to talk about now the bookmakers. Obviously, they've been releasing odds, and they've been taking down odds because of the times we live in, right? But let's look at the AFC East, and right now, taking the latest odds from the sports books, Buffalo Bills plus 138 to win the AFC East, Miami Dolphins plus 1,300, New England. Now, I just noticed yesterday it was minus 108. I wonder what it was about 2 weeks ago before the Cam Newton signing. That'd be interesting to see if they just made an adjustment.
Did I see minus 140 on going over to regular season win total of 9? Is that what you're referring to, or minus 140 on winning the division? I'm sorry.
Yeah, winning the division. I have minus 108, but is it 140 now? Maybe it changed. I just took this yesterday, and I got the
winning the division. Yes, minus 108. I don't know what it was. As a matter of fact.
I took this last night from Bookmaker, minus 108, and the Jets, plus 930. So now we're going to go through each team here, Ross, the season over-unders. We're going to start with the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bookmaker has the Bills at over-under at 9, plus 100, and under minus 120. Now, looking at the Bills last season, looking at their 10-7, including playoffs, the one thing that stood out was the 13-4 to the under. So, obviously Buffalo, they do have a really good defense. Josh Allen now, he's got a year under his belt, looking a little bit better. And, hey, hopefully he learned from that last game against Tennessee. No lead is comfortable in any sport. And hopefully that really pissed me off that game because I'm a Bills fan, right? And it's just, I was in Miami at the time. I was on the holidays, and I was out with my wife, and I was feeling really good until about the middle of the third quarter. And then, it just ruined the whole night. In fact, here's a little story. I was in Miami watching the basketball game that was Duke in Miami, and we're in line, and then the guy in had a TV, his iPhone, and we're watching the game in his line. And I got there in a good mood, but I left in a bad mood when I saw that the Bills lost. But looking at the Bills, Ross, I'm just going to bring up some stats here for the Bills. You still with me, Ross?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm all ears at this point.
Yeah. So looking at the Bills schedule, the first 5 games look pretty favorable to the Bills. Versus the Jets at home, they're at Miami, they're home to the Chargers, and then they're on the road to the Raiders in Tennessee. So not a bad first 5 games for the Buffalo Bills. Their testing point is going to be in the middle of the year when they're at Tennessee, Kansas City, then they got at New York Jets. It's always tough to win on the road, and then New England. Depending on New England now, New England with Cam Newton, still Belichick's there. It's still New England, right? Um, their over/unders at 9. I do like them to go over at 9. What are your thoughts, Ross?
Yeah, I agree with that. I like them to go over 9 as well. I think you may see a better team than they were a year ago. I think you look at their depth. That's the big thing that sticks out, Ron. Their offensive line, they bring back not only the 5 starters, which is a lot of continuity on the offensive line, and that's very important when you come to offensive line play, and people overlook that. Plus, their top 3 backups from a season ago are back. Defensive line, you'd be hard-pressed to find another defensive line that has the quality depth as Buffalo has right now in their top 8. 2 sparkling young linebackers in Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds. Their secondary is outstanding. 2 great safeties, all-pro cornerback with Tre'Davious White. And Josh Allen's going to be the key. I mean, I know it's been beaten to death in the press, and we've heard it time and time again, but how he progresses is going to go a long way in how deep they can go. I think this is a 10 or 11 win team. More difficult schedule than they had last season, unequivocally so. However, better team all around. Pretty good running back in Devin Singletary. They draft Zach Moss in the 3rd round. Another good player that's going to probably make a splash. 2 good young running backs. I really like this Buffalo team. I do. I like them to win the division. At odds of plus 138, I think that's a tremendous value. And I know a lot of splash has been made this week with Cam Newton in New England, right? And you're right, Ron. As long as Bill Belichick's there, they're never going to be an easy out. But I just don't like New England's wide receivers still. I think their defense is solid, but I think they could be had this year.
Yeah, and again, looking at their schedule, Ross, it's like a hamburger, right? All the meat's in the middle here, and that's where they're gonna really. It's gonna not make or break their season, but it's gonna maybe. Are they gonna be like a 10-6 team, or are they gonna be 11-5? Maybe 9-7. But
10-6 might win the division, Ron. You know what I mean?
No, you're absolutely right. But but the thing I'm looking at is their last 3 games. The only thing I'm a little concerned. It's at Denver, at New England, and then at home to Miami. And we know, teams, there used to be a stat on teams that played in the warm climate. Remember, Tampa Bay was really, anytime they got into minus, see, this is where the Fahrenheit Celsius thing's going to come into play here with the Canadian. 0 or let's just say really cold. When it gets really cold, Miami playing in Buffalo, you don't know what the weather's going to be on January 3rd in Buffalo, right? But again, I do like the Bills. Their defense is getting better. Josh Allen improving. Singletary needs to stay healthy. Looking at their they're running a 4-3 defense, and again, you said it. They got Edmonds. I can't wait to see what he's going to do. And then Matt Barkley, Jake Fromm, still question that one there, but you got Singletary. I like TJ Yeldon from when he was playing with Jacksonville. Stephon Diggs, right?
Yeah, I forgot to mention him.
Yeah, like what kind of impact is he going to have? And that's the one thing that's been holding back the Bills the last couple of years is that deep threat, that receiver. I always I got a buddy of mine. He's a big Cowboy fan, and he makes a great point. He goes, you look at every football team, they always have the triplets. And back in the day when you had Aikman, Smith, Irving, when teams have good triplets, then you have a good defense, you can go places, right? And I think if Stephon Diggs can stay healthy, obviously then probably, he got a little emotional last year in Minnesota with some playing time, or just
he wasn't getting targeted enough in his opinion. Look, Adam Thielen. Here's the thing that people don't realize, Ron, if I can interject.
Oh, go ahead.
You brought up Stefan Diggs, and I forgot. I don't know why I forgot to mention him, but Diggs drew a lot of double teams.
Yeah.
Okay. Which opened up the field for Thielen. I mean, he had like 94 catches or whatever. He had something sick last year. We'll see how good he is this year when now he's getting the double teams, meaning Thielen. Not to get off course, but let's not forget, Buffalo had 2 receivers last year who are back now. John Brown had over 1,000 yards receiving last year. Cole Beasley is one of the best slot receivers in all of football. These guys are going to benefit from Stefan Diggs being there because Stefan Diggs, now he's going to draw a lot of double teams, but if you look at the percentages, Ron, he was the best in the NFL as far as contested balls that were caught. And double teams don't bother this guy, and it's going to open up the field for Brown and Beasley. Yeah,
being a Bills fan, Ross, and going back to my Jim Kelly years, and those, we're not going to get into that 1994, going to the dance and never winning. But when I look back at those Bills teams, there's one thing that you need to have in cold weather cities, and that's a tight end. Metzeler, he was one of those guys. It's just when it gets so cold, that quick pass, that look in, and having a guy like, back then Metzeler, I know looking at the Bills tight ends, Dawson Knox, Tyler Kroft, like these are guys that are going to have to play huge impact. And you're seeing it come back with the fullbacks too, right? Not remember the Mike Allstott years, how, dominant he was. But I think the tight end in Buffalo will have to play some type of big role on offense, and especially in cities like Buffalo when it gets cold, right? Anybody can throw the ball September, October, and, a little bit of November. But once you get to December, well, not even November. November gets pretty cold up there. But, once you get to the second half of your schedule, I always say, and as a coach, this is the coach going to come out with me right now, you want to win championship, run the ball, play good defense. That's how you win championships.
And they got the ingredients to do both. And, I mean, you mentioned Dawson Knox. I personally think he's got a bigger upside than Metzeler does because he's much more athletic. The kid just he dropped 8 balls last year. That's what hurt him. But if you look at his upside, his athletic prowess from the tight end position, his ability to stretch the field vertically, I think they got a good one on their hands. And let's not forget, Tyler Kroft was injured last year. And when he came back, he wasn't 100%. This kid's got an upside too. So a very good point, Ron. I do like their tight ends, though.
Yeah. All right. So we'll put a nail on that one. That's the Buffalo Bills. And as a Bills fan, and this is where I'm going to be a little bit biased. Let's go Bills. Let's have a good season. All right. Let's talk about the New England Patriots. Now, the bookmakers have come out, and I'm just going to pull up the number here. For the Patriots, they're not used to seeing single digits over-unders, right? Over-under 9 minus 148 and under plus 123. Now, looking at the Patriots from last season, 12-4, 6-2 at home and away, 5-1 in the division, 8-4 in the conference. Against the point spread number, 9-8, 12-5 straight up. If you're talking playoffs too, Ross. Obviously things are going to be a little different there. But we keep reminding ourselves that Brady was getting up there in age, and as much as being a Bills fan and always being pissed off when they play New England, and it just, I thought last year was the year we could have had them because they weren't dominant like they were in prior years. They could have been had, and they were. But looking at them this year, the one thing that's going to work in their favor from the schedule is the first 4 games out of 6 are playing at home. They've got Miami out of the gate, then they're at Seattle, then they got the Raiders at home, but then they got Kansas City, Denver, and then the bye week. So not a bad schedule for Belichick and company here. When your first 4 or 5 games are at home, right? Yeah. And also back-to-back games in LA in week number 13 and 14. So they play a Sunday, the December 6th against the Chargers. Obviously, they're going to stay there and play the Thursday night against the Rams, and then they're going to finish off the year with 3 division games at Miami, a tough game at home. That's one thing that's working in their favor. At home to Buffalo, and then at home to the Jets. What are your thoughts, Ross, on the Patriots?
Let's look at when I look at strength of schedule, Ron. If you use the barometer that what's the cumulative record of your opponents from the season before, New England right now has the toughest schedule in the NFL. If you look at the 16 teams they're going to play, actually it's 13 teams, but they're playing a division twice. If you look at their opponent's record from the season before, New England's opponents have the best combined record than any other team in the NFL. So it's not going to be easy. Also, we're looking at a quarterback transition. Yeah, Brady is getting up there in age, but still there was that familiarity with working with Josh McDaniels. Now you're looking at a season where there was no mini camps, nothing done on the field. Everything was done virtually. You're looking at an unproven quarterback in Jarrett Stidham, and now you bring in Cam Newton, and there's going to be some. You said the early part of their schedule. I think that's where it's going to be one or done for New England, because if they can get by that early part with all the moving parts they have offensively, then watch out. But again, their schedule is not an easy one, and I think that's going to work to Buffalo's advantage as well. Is in also Buffalo's continuity again compared to New England's, especially offensively. Let's not forget this was the best defense in football last year in New England. That's not going to change. The problem is going to be I don't like their wide receivers. I'm not crazy about their tight ends and the new quarterback situation. So I think that's going to weigh up and work against New England and favor Buffalo in that regard.
So you thinking under 9?
This is one where it's a really tough call. I did an article for OSGA. I did go under with New England. That was before Cam Newton came into play. Let's face it. I mean, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to know he's a much more proven and athletic quarterback than Jarrett Stidham is. So that puts a whole new light on things. If you put the proverbial gun to my head, I would go under 9. But they very easily could fall right around that number. The big thing, Ron, is they were 9 before Cam Newton. They're 9 now. The only thing is the books raised it up to what, like minus 140 on the over 9, Ron?
Yeah, I said one. Let me see here. 1 second here. 148.
Yeah, 140. That's an extremely high money line on our over and under regular season win total, which leads me to believe the books don't want to come off that number, right? Yeah. Usually, if it got up that high, they'd move them to 9.5. They're not willing to. I would not be shocked if they fell right on 9. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and you know what, Ross? But staying on 9, they're not throwing a hook there because they don't want. They're hoping the hook saves them. Like, you know what I mean? Like if they stay on a flat number, then their chances are better that then it's a push, right? And that's maybe what they're hoping for.
And that's another thing, the anticipation, the perception, people acting emotionally, jumping on New England over 9 because Cam Newton all of a sudden got signed. Look, this is a guy who missed 14 games last year with Carolina. He's been banged up. No doubt about it, he's a better and more proven quarterback, but there's no guarantees when it comes to health.
And there's a great point you just said right there. And the thing with Cam Newton, you go back to his Auburn years, and the RPOs, they have a toll in your body. Like Michael Vick said it, forget which quarterback he was referenced that always kept running. I think it was in Baltimore, Lamar Jackson, saying that, you know what, make a business decision. I used to tell our quarterbacks when I coached football, make a business decision. Don't try to, blow over the linebacker or blow over a DB. Slide or get out of bounds. We call that a business.
Josh Allen's case, trying to leap over a defender. I mean, he made that highlight reel against Minnesota, but you keep doing that eventually, son, you're going to be on the sideline.
Well, this is where they'll learn type thing, right? Well, then they'll realize that, okay, it's not important to make the highlight reel this week. I've made enough of them. But Cam Newton, going back to Cam Newton, RPO, that's what he's known. Every quarterback has their bread and butter, what they're known for, right? Cam Newton's going to have to adjust his game. Josh Daniels is going to have to really fine-tune his offense towards, it's just like anything, his strengths and weaknesses. And I agree with you, Ross. The wide receivers in New England has really what kept them back the last couple of years. Being a quarterback coach and being an ex quarterback, believe it or not, you like big targets. But Edelman, when you're in the pocket and your receiver's 5'10", it's like throwing darts and hopefully you hit the board, right? It's just, when you got a big body receiver that's 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", his range is everywhere. And, your range is limited when you're 5'9", 5'10". Marcus Lee, though, I remember him when he was in Jacksonville, and I used to take him on some fantasies. I said, man, this is a nice little sleeper. If he can really raise his game up, and Mohamed Sanu, and Sonny Michel needs to stay healthy. If Sonny Michel can stay healthy, then then we can talk about maybe hitting that 9. Defensively, what can you say? They're up there with Buffalo, and you got Belichick, who's a defensive guru. But the question mark, and again, I'll bring back the triplet theories, right? So the triplets here would be Michelle, Newton, and Edelman, and you can do that to every NFL team. Go look at their triplets and see how it's going to affect your mindset handicap in that game, right? And again, we talked about this earlier, Ross. We're not fantasy guys. We're sports bettors, and we don't handicap players, or we handicap numbers. And it's not us against Cam Newton or Sonny Michel or Julian Edelman. It's us against the bookmaker's number, and that's my opponent every week, is that number. So I just wanted to throw that out there so that people look at us and say,
Let me ask you a question as a former coach, Ron. I mean, if you're a defensive coordinator, myself, if I'm the defensive coordinator and I'm playing and I'm game planning for New England, I'm going to double team Edelman. I'm going to force these other two guys on the outside that you mentioned, Sanu and Marquise Lee, to beat me. And that's a thing that Edelman thrived in New England's offense prior to that, because he's like Cole Beasley. With a little more athleticism. You give them guys single coverage, they find a way to get open. Now, modern day football now, these option routes, right? Yeah. These guys are masters at it. But if you're game planning against New England, would you follow a similar path that I just touched upon?
Well, the thing with a guy like Cam Newton is you got to stick to your rules. With an RPO quarterback, defensive end, you can't go be chasing the run. Like you got to let the linebackers do his job. And defensive end, your read as a quarterback, you stay on the quarterback. Don't get sucked in on the zone read, and play responsible football. And then with the Edelman thing, you can spy him with the safety. You see a lot of cover 2 in the NFL, where you got 2 safeties on top. In the Canadian Football League, you don't see a lot of cover. Yeah, you do. Like we call it match defense. But the thing in the NFL, you can do a lot of things with your free safeties, right? And you're playing cover 2, so you can bring one down to if you wanted double team. But that's what I would do. I would play responsible football. I'm trying to think of that word. It'll come to me. But yeah, with an option quarterback, they can get you fits, and you just got to be responsible and play to your responsibilities, and try to limit your errors, because offense are always going to get their touches, and they're always, defense are always read and react, right? So that's one thing with playing RPO quarterbacks.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, again, if I can make one final point, and I know we're going far further with this.
Oh, it's okay. That's a good thing about podcasts, Ross. There's no time limit. I don't have the big book.
No doubt. But, I mean, I don't know how you feel about this. I just don't think, for example, not to pick on Lamar Jackson, but I just don't think the RPO is sustainable at the NFL level. I think eventually this kid's going to take a beating. And we also saw that once Baltimore fell behind in that playoff game, and we saw it the year before when they fell behind in the playoff game, when you're taking that RPO away and you're forcing this kid to be a drop-back passer, he's a whole different quarterback. So, I mean, again, I think it's you can get away with that on the college level with the athleticism and speed at the NFL level and how strong these defenders are. You're going to take a world of beating, and eventually that's going to catch up to you. And I think that's what we're starting to see with Cam Newton. I mean, he's getting worn down.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how Josh McDaniel handles him.
So the word I was looking for was called assignment football.
Yes.
Yeah,
Where the
I knew it
defensive
would come
line
back to
doesn't
me.
crash
Uh,
down, you
and
know.
remember, like, and you're to on your point though, Ross. The one thing when I was coaching university was that you during the week you know your opponent, and you'd have scout periods, and it all depends how much time you're managing. Like if you get a threat like a Cam Newton one week, and your defense has never seen a zone read team or an RPO type team, well, it's going to play an effect of your practice that week, because now your coach has got to come up with the plays of your opponent. You got to go through scout period. You got to run the exact same plays that Cam Newton is running, and these are things that you can fix those mistakes on a Tuesday, or in the NFL's case on a Wednesday and a Thursday, but you can't fix them on Sunday when you're two, the team's a 3rd and 2, and you got to get out there in the next series, right?
You
So
almost have to take a guy on a scout team, and you correct me if I'm wrong, there might not even be a quarterback. He's got to emulate that quarterback's athleticism.
we used to take running backs. We
Yeah.
used to take running backs in practice and say, look, we're going to have to take running backs and do, because the slow 5-2 quarterback that we have is not really cutting it, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Yeah, we did a good job there. All right, let's go to the next one here, Ross. We're going to talk about the New York Jets, Jets, Jets. And over under here, looks like a baseball when Randy Johnson was facing Pedro Martinez there at 6.5. Over under 6.5 at -140 to the over, and the under 6.5 plus 116. Now, obviously the Jets. The thing I look for, and the one thing in sports, Ross, it doesn't have to be just for football. What's the identity of the New York Jets? And I still don't know it. And we'll get to that in a second. Now, looking at the Jets here, their schedule. Now, I looked at their schedule. It's a pretty balanced schedule. If there's one thing that's probably helping them this year, it's the balanced schedule of their season. But they got real 2 tough opponents out of the gate. They got at Buffalo on September 13th, and then they got San Francisco, who was in the Super Bowl last year. So, it's not an easy task to start. You don't want to start 0-2, because that wears on the psyche of a team. And during the middle of the year, they got a Miami sandwich, which won't be a really big issue with them. But they got at New England to end the year. Over under 6.5 with a balanced schedule. I don't know, Ross. I'll let you. I'll throw you a lob ball and I'll let you handle this one.
Yeah. Thank you, Ron. Always looking out after a friend.
There you go. I got your back, buddy.
But no, I do have a strong opinion actually on this. I like the under here. Look, I don't like the Jets' offensive line. All you have to do is look at Le'Veon Bell last year and his lack of production compared to what he did behind that great offensive lines he played with in Pittsburgh. Their wide receiver position, they lost Robbie Anderson to free agency, takes away a vertical threat. Sam Darnold, I'm not sold on him at all, Ron, to this point. Their tight ends leave a lot to be desired. Their defense is pretty good, but the problem with the defense is they get worn down because the Jets' offense hasn't been able to sustain drives with any kind of consistency. Again, when you look at their schedule, you got to keep in mind, if New England's playing the toughest schedule in the NFL based on cumulative records of their opponents, the Jets are playing a similar schedule. They're facing everybody in the division. They're facing everybody in the NFC West, which, by the way, the NFC West last year, by far the most strongest division in football. 3 teams with a winning record, even though the Rams were 9-7. They didn't make the playoffs. They're also playing the AFC West, which includes the Kansas City Chiefs. So not exactly an easy schedule. I like the under here to make it short and sweet.
Okay. And my red flag, Ross, is when you see players wanting to bolt your team, that tells me there's issues that that we don't know about. And you're professional players and you're getting paid well, and you don't want to play for the team. And we all understand there's different circumstances leading to situations. To me, I just don't like the fact that you got guys wanting to leave. That's always, being a team guy, an ex-military guy, you've been ingrained in your mind that team first, right? So that's one thing that worries me right there.
Speaks to culture, right, Ron?
Exactly, right. It's all culture, and man, I can talk to you some good stories about that. Sam Darnold is what kind of quarterback is he? What is he going to be like? Is he the jury's still out on Sam Darnold, right? But the good thing is they got Joe Flacco as a backup, David Fells third string, Le'Veon Bell. Wasn't there rumblings that he wanted to go back to Pittsburgh?
I didn't catch that, but
Okay. So you got Le'Veon Bell, Frank Gore, man, this guy. I thought,
I mean, look, I don't want to spit on a future Hall of Famer, his career,
yeah,
but it's somebody close to him after watching him the last half of the season in Buffalo should have said, look, quit while you're ahead.
yeah,
It reminds me of Muhammad Ali hanging on way too long and losing to lesser fighters, losing to Trevor Burbick in his last fight. That's what it reminds me of with Frank Gore.
yeah.
So, and he's going to be playing behind a weak offensive line beside Ron.
Yeah, and you know what, that experience, maybe he's there to calm the rookies or bring that. He does have a calm demeanor to himself, and he's the ultimate professional. Again, a future Hall of Famer. It's that's the toughest thing in sports is when does an athlete know it's time to go, right? Look at Brett Favre, great example. It's just that sometimes in life you're just not ready to let go yet because you love not only do you love the being part of a National Football League, but you love being part of your daily routine. One of the things I say in life to friends and all that, one of the most important things in your life is your daily routine. As soon as you take away your daily routine, man, the wheels can fall right off and you can go south in a hurry. That's why you see a lot of people in life, they don't retire because what are you going to do? And, I'm not saying that Frank Gore, that's the situation, but when you only know one thing and that's part of your daily life and routine, and you're in your mind, you're just geared to routine. Maybe something that more strong-minded, not willing to let go yet, right? Looking at the wide receivers, Perriman, Crowder, Mims. Again, where's the triplets here? This triplets doesn't scare me. And when I look at this, Brett Maher, he was a kicker here in Ottawa when he got his shot in the NFL. Played with the Ottawa Redblacks in the CFL, and then he went to Dallas. Not a bad kicker, I guess. 3-4 defense. This defense here, again, it's going to be suspect at best. I'm with you, Ross. I don't see 7 wins out of this.
What's going to happen with Jamal Adams if he's even going to be there when the season starts?
Well, that's just it, right? And I think the wise move for professional bettors or people out there right now, there's better things to bet on, right? All right, so put a nail in that one, Ross. All right, let's talk about the Miami Dolphins. Now, Fitzmagic and company, right? They got quarterback issues that we'll get into in a second. But looking at the Dolphins here from last season, I'm going to bring up their record here: 5-11. Obviously, not a great season. Looking at their schedule this year, for the first 6 games, Ross, they're going to be on the road. Doesn't get easy the first couple of games. At New England, at home to Buffalo, at Jacksonville, home to Seattle, at San Fran. Might as well just mail it in now, eh?
Go ahead though. I
want to listen. And then you look at their then they're going to look at the end of their schedule. They got Kansas City in week 14, New England week 15, the Raiders, and then at Buffalo. This and looking at the season total here for the Miami Dolphins, looking at their total here, over under 6. Man, they're right up there with the Jets. You know what I mean? This is I don't know, Ross. This one here puzzles me a bit. When I look at this, obviously they got Tua, but looking at this offense, like I look at their triplets, right? So you got Fitzpatrick, obviously going to be the starter, but for how long? What do you do with Josh Rosen? And then you got Jordan Howard, Matt Breida, Devontae Parker. This is it's going to be an interesting sledding here for the. I still think they're going to be a couple years away before Tua gets the full reins here. But I think you go under here, Ross.
Well, I'm going to disagree.
Okay, good.
Here's the thing that I look at, Ron. This team started 0-7 straight up and against the spread last year. They were getting blown out of every game. They were on pace to be the worst ever NFL team in history. Then they turn around the last 9 games and go 5-4. What does that tell me? They didn't quit on their head coach.
No.
Okay, Brian Flores is I think is going to be a very good NFL head coach as time develops here. Now, am I ready to anoint them as a playoff team? Absolutely not. But you look at what they did last year, finishing 5-11, the tough schedule you just touched upon, yet the sports books have them at 6. They're not that nice. Sports books, let me clue you in, folks. Sports books are not generous, okay? They're begging you to take the under here. I think Miami could be a 7-win, 8-win team if all falls right. I like the culture that's been set by Brian Flores as opposed to the Jets, what we just touched upon. I think that Tua will eventually be under center. I think if he stays healthy, he's going to be an exciting quarterback to watch. You mentioned a running back group, much better than they were a season ago. With Breida coming in and Jordan Howard. I mean, those are 2 pretty good running backs. And their defense, still a little bit young, maybe a year away. I don't know. I just got this sneaky feeling, Ron. Again, it's about beating the number, right?
Yep.
It's about the psychology of beating the number sometime, too. I'm going to take a small shot here on going over 6.
Yeah, you know what? It's I'm not going to argue with that. It's just that when I look at that schedule, again, tough last 2 games on the road. Warm weather team going to Raiders. You're not bad, but Buffalo. You got New England, Kansas City. It's going to be a tough. But you're right. Looking at their schedule here last year, in week number. I'm going to bring this up here, Ross. Week 14, they played the Jets. They covered 22-21. They lost to 36-20 to the Dolphins. That means the Giants.
Yeah.
And then
they beat New England in the game. New England had to win to get a first round bye.
Yeah, that was huge.
At New England.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the letdown factor. That's probably a classic letdown factor right there when the Dolphins beat the Patriots. So
yeah, I mean, letdown to a point. I mean, you got to win to get a first round bye, and how important that is. We know in the NFL, the shorter path to the Super Bowl. But you're right, Ron. I mean, the psychology is. We're playing the Dolphins. We killed them the first time around on the road. We got to win this game. But, yeah, that was a little bit shocking.
Yeah, no, you're right. Now, all right. So, again, folks, if you're listening to us for the first time, you can find us on your favorite download podcast, Apple's iTunes. You can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. And we're going to kick it off now. That's the end of our NFL segment. Our next show we're going to probably, we'll go into another division, maybe the NFC East or whatever. We'll decide that when we get off air, Ross. Now we're going to talk a bit about baseball. And you know what, Ross? Hopefully, I know we're living in these crazy times right now, and that we're trying to get these sports going, and maybe we feel a bit forced to try to get them going. But I think we're living in a day-by-day situation. So I'm hoping there is baseball, as I love watching baseball and I love being a numbers guy. Baseball gives me so much data to play with. But looking at the baseball futures now, for the people listening, maybe you want to clue them in, Ross, or tune them in on how exactly the schedule is going to work this year. You were saying beforehand.
Yep. So it's a 60-game schedule, and each team will play their division opponents. There's 5 teams in each division 10 times. So that encompasses 40 of your 60 games. Because of the COVID-19 and the dangers that come along with travel, for example, the AL East will face the NL East. They'll play each NL East team 4 times, twice at home, twice on the road. That totals 20 games, and that's how you come up with a 60-game schedule. And again, AL East versus NL East, AL West versus NL West, AL Central versus NL Central. you're reducing the schedule or reducing the travel, excuse me, Ron. But that's how they made it up this year, and it certainly makes a lot of sense in the climate we're living in.
Yeah. And you know what? Now this is going to play in favor of some of the teams out there. Like some people are saying, "Oh, thank God I'm not in the AL East where I got to face the Yankees every day or the Rays or depending what the Red Sox are going to look like, right?" There's some there's going to be some soft spots for some teams out there come baseball. I'm going to share with you something here, Ross, and with our audience. I'm going to do a share screen here. Hopefully, bear with me right here, folks. Let me know if you see this, Ross.
Yes.
Okay, so what I done here, I took our database and I went through all of the teams and how they did last season against division opponents and their over/under. And this column here is all the in the green is the straight up, and then the column over here is the over/under. Now, when it comes to baseball betting, Ross, I'm a big totals guy. I would say that I'm a 70-30 type guy when it comes to betting baseball, 70% totals. And when you look at, and the reason why, anytime you bet into a money line sports,
Yes.
it's a whole different, the law of average doesn't really work in some of these teams' favor, right? And that's why the adjuster is the bookmaker and his numbers that he puts towards team. And that's why I love totals, because when you look at the end of the year, what's the job, the bookmaker's job, right? I need to get the numbers as even as possible so I don't tip my hand or the public does not have form a pre-opinion on a team. And like, for example, right here, the New York Mets last year against division opponents, look at the over-under, 42, 25, and 9. Now, when you look at this and you say to yourself, okay, why on earth is the total so high to the over? And this is where we get into this perception versus reality thing, Ross. The perception is with the Mets, when you look at their starting rotation, right? Jacob deGrom, Marcus Stroman. Now they got Rick Porcello here this year, Steven Matz, Michael Wacha. Like, you got a pretty good starting five that for this year, but some of these guys, Porcello was in Boston last year. Marcus Stroman got at the trade deadline. There's a perception with a strong pitching staff that, and then teams form this opinion as an under team. I don't know if you're like me, Ross, but you look at some teams and you've already preconceived a perception on that team. They're an under team. Texas, well, they're an over team. But it's going to be different this year in that new cathedral that they built out there in Texas. But when I look at baseball like that, the Mets like that, 42, 25, and 9. So totals are going to be something that I'm going to be monitoring, betting early in baseball. Now, the bookmakers have put out their numbers. I'm going to get to that in a second. But just looking at some of these teams here last year, and there's an article, folks, on atsstats.com. And in fact, I think I can show it to you right here, Ross. Right? Do you see this?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll get to that in a second. So Houston Astros, 56-20. Yankees, 54-22. Dodgers, like these are the creme of the creme, right? The top teams. Minnesota, Cleveland, Milwaukee. They've all done well against division opponents. Philadelphia had a losing, with all the money they spent on that, Girardi's going to bring a different element over there. He's going to bring that Yankee swagger to the Phillies. Philly fan probably doesn't want to hear that, but he's going to bring in that work ethic that we know that he has. Looking at 36 and 40, Oakland A's, Moneyball team. Since the Oakland A's are always that one team, the Padres, the Brewers. They're the I call them the value teams, right? They fly under the radar, small market teams. They don't get the limelight on ESPN and all that, but they're the ones that you probably bet the most if
you get a lot of value on them, like you.
Absolutely. But looking at some of these teams, the Angels, horrible division, 25-32. The Angels got to make a move this year. They got to play better. What are your thoughts, Ross, on division play?
Well, division play, you certainly have to take into account heavily when you handicap because they're playing each other the most. And I'm looking at this year. If we can get into a couple of futures bets, I would start with my best bet, which would be on the New York Yankees. I mean, you look at what they did last year in division alone, 54-22, and we were talking off air. One of the pros with the Yankees is the fact that now all of a sudden, because the season has been delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, guys like Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Hicks, Aaron Judge, and James Paxton, who were not going to be available at the beginning of the season, will now be available at right from the get-go. So I think that that's going to be a big pro for the Yankees in terms of their division record as well. And at plus 358, that's not a bad value at it with a team that has that much talent and is that deep. And let's not forget, they signed Garrett Cole, and he's going to be pitching every fifth day, which means about 12 times over a 60-game schedule. So the con is this, Ron, when it comes to the Yankees. This short schedule is going to favor a lot of teams with less talent. And I know that seems like an oxymoron, but follow along here. How many times annually we see 3 or 4 teams, right, Ron, that start out red hot and go, wow, I didn't see this coming, and eventually the cream comes to the top and these teams tail off. Well, they're going to have a little bit of an advantage this year in a 60-game schedule, so that could come back and haunt the Yankees.
Yeah, and you know what? And teams don't have the luxury this year of starting slow. There's some teams in the past that start slow out of the gate, and then they, come May, June, they start warming up. They always say it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Washington last year, right, Ron?
Yeah, exactly. It's not like they say, right? It's not how you start, it's how you finish. But you won't have time to start. If you start off 2-8, you're in trouble. And looking at this season here, this reminds me of like a tournament, like a pickup tournament, or where you're gonna have to really look at veteran teams. I don't think this is the year where you think the young guns or a young team. I think you go to a veteran team that with a veteran coaching staff experience. I'm looking at a team like Tampa Bay, and I think the Tampa Bay Rays in a tough division, and I think what's going to make these teams better is the teams in your division. Like you won't get better playing in a weak division. Like looking at some of these divisions up here, I don't know if you can see these divisions here, Ross, like from last year.
Yes, I can.
Like, the Central Division. Okay, you might be able to dominate, but the thing is, once you get out of your division, you start playing teams that face the other team's ace 3, 4, 5 times in the season. If you're a team like Minnesota or Cleveland, Detroit, Kansas City, Chicago White Sox, are these teams going to make you better this year in a shortened season, right? And that's what I'm looking at. Which team, which division here is going to make every other team better? And knowing that if you won that division, man, you earned that division because you faced the Yankees, you faced the Boston, Toronto Blue Jays. Like I'm going to sound like a homer right now, and how fitting it is Canada Day, and I'm talking about the Blue Jays, and not wearing my red Blue Jays. Those were bad luck, eh? There, make it official at 2:26 a.m. I gave my first A. Okay. So yeah, no, I think the Tampa Bay Rays for me, Ross, and I'm looking at their starting rotation. And again, I know Snell, hopefully he's going to be playing. But looking at the starting, Charlie Morton, Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, Ryan Yarbrough, and Yoni Sharonos, that's a solid starting 5. And Charlie, hey, he reminds me a bit of Kevin Brown back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Just that veteran presence. So to me, Ross, I'm looking at the Tampa Bay Rays as probably my best bet to win. For a long shot, you know what? That's where it gets a little tricky. Maybe the San Diego Padres is a team. They got some really. They got Machado last year. I don't know if that starting rotation is going to be have enough depth. Like Paddock was great last year. Lamet. You got Garrett Richards, Zach Davies from when he played in Milwaukee. That's a solid. Cal Quantrill, son of Paul. That's a solid little back. So if you do like a long shot here, I think San Diego, even though they played, but again, this is what I talked about earlier. The teams in this division are going to make San Diego better. Dodgers obviously are going to come out of the division, I believe. But if you're thinking of a long shot, I think San Diego might be a team you want to consider.
Yeah, my long shot would be the St. Louis Cardinals. Some 91-71 a season ago. You look at their division record, which was pretty good. I had it in front of me a second ago, and that was 47-32. I love their starting rotation, Ron. That's going to be key. Another thing to look at is bullpens right now. I mean, at the end of the day, you mentioned Tampa Bay. I mean, Tampa Bay was notorious over the last couple of years of pitching by committee. I think we're going to see a heck of a lot more of that this year at the beginning of the season because of the shortened spring training and the fear of hurting somebody's arm who isn't fully stretched out like they normally would be at this time of year. So I like the Cardinals. I think the only con with the Cardinals is they have to hit. And that was a little bit of an issue, and that was eventually caught up to them last year. I think Paul Goldschmidt's going to be key. He can't get off to the kind of start he did last year, especially in this shortened season. But at 30-1 odds, plus 3,000, 30, what is it, plus 3,000, I think you get a lot of value with the Cardinals. A past division winner. They're going to be facing the AL Central. Just look at Kansas City and Detroit. Those are pretty favorable matchups for the Cardinals. So I'm going to take a shot with them, Ron.
Yeah, no, not a bad choice. Goldschmidt, when I remember was Arizona, was solid. And sometimes I don't like it when a player that has a lot of success with one team, then he leaves. Like, was it Stanton? Remember when he started with Miami? Then he went to it's just
Yankees.
Just been bad luck going to the Yankees. Like, to me, you're playing with karma there. And then you almost got to, like, for Stanton, go back to where he had success, right? And the Goldsmith, I hope he doesn't run into a Stanton issue where, he had an okay season last year, but, he was dominant when he was with Arizona.
Yeah, and the thing you have to look at with Goldschmidt, he did come on in the second half of the year last year. He had a great second half. But he does, say what you will about Arizona, they're pitching very shaky, but he had better hitters around him.
Yeah.
Protected him in the lineup. St. Louis, he didn't have that luxury last year. Now, maybe that will change this year. Maybe the comfort levels there. I think the big issue with Stanton is his inability to stay healthy more than anything.
Yeah.
And that's not an issue with Goldschmidt. So we'll see, Ron.
Yeah. No, hey, you know what? You're absolutely right. So, all right. Hey, great first show, Ross. I thought, it just flew by, and hopefully our audience or the people listening on podcasts or on YouTube or wherever you download your podcast, you enjoyed this. Yeah, you know what, buddy? I've known you a long time, Ross. Man, I think it was like 2006 or something. And we go a long way from the Phoenix Sports days. And when we got together and we said, you know what, there's not too many guys you know that you do something like this, that you know exactly what you get when you get with Ross Benjamin. And I knew getting into this with you that the benefactor of this will be the audience and people, especially the young rookie or the young novice better, the experience that hopefully we're going to be able to teach these guys, and your experience, then the contests you've won and your experience, and people can get your plays each and every day at your website, and you're going to be a staple here at ATS Stats. And you know what, buddy, I'm just so happy that you're going to be here, and I look forward to doing many of these shows with you, and also with the big Ragu, Christian Nally, and Jeff Honer. Hopefully he can come on board. And if you hear my dog in the background, he's going nuts with his chew toy. That's the beauty about doing these shows right at home.
Yeah, in closing, is God bless Ron Raymond's mother would say, "What's your hurry? Here's your coat."
Yeah, God bless Mom. Yeah, she had but believe it or not, my grandmother had the better one-liners. Yeah, like maybe I'll come up with once a week, come up with the Gene Granger quote of the week. Yeah, so yeah, one of her favorite quotes was go. She used to get mad and she'd say, go piss up a rope and play with the steam. I never understood that saying. Go piss up a rope and play with the steam. Like, what does that mean? I have no idea what that means.
Let me just say this. I'm very excited about this venture. I really look forward to working with you. It's been a long time. It's like we haven't missed a beat. And, I would encourage the folks to visit atsstats.com, not only to buy our selections, but there's a wealth of knowledge on that site. And you'd be hard-pressed to find any site on the web today. There's a lot of great handicapping portals out there. But the creative thought process that Ron puts into putting up his stats up there is second to none. And I would encourage anybody, especially you novice bettors out there, with the advent now of the U.S. legalizing sports betting in a lot of states. It's about time. You could really utilize that site. That's atsstats.com, folks.
I appreciate that, Ross. And Ross will be part of our website. And Ross, if people want to find you, where can they contact you?
They could come right to my website. That's rbwins.com, rbwins.com. Doing the same thing there, selling my picks, putting up my articles, putting up my videos. As a matter of fact, when I get off the air, I'm going to get the file to this video podcast and put it up at my site. So a little bit of an interchange there, but you could also find me, as I just alluded to, at atsstats.com. Look forward to a great year, Ron.
That's awesome, Ross. All right, buddy. Like I always say in my videos when I close off, and it's almost my my tagline: shop for value and play those percentages, eh?
Yeah, there you
hey?
go.
Hey. Happy Canada Day to everybody, and I look forward to doing our next show here on the Raymond Report. I'm your host, Ron Raymond, and today's special guest was Ross Benjamin, and you can find Ross each and every day right here at atsstats.com. All right, Ross, that's a wrap, and we'll talk off air, and we'll have our next show ready to go. And again, folks, you can find us on Spotify, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, everywhere you download your podcasts. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, not bad.